Most people imagine chemicals as something dramatic, toxic spills, warning symbols, or laboratory accidents. But the chemicals shaping modern health don't arrive with alarms. They arise quietly, printed in small fonts on the back of everyday food packages. Preservatives, stabilizers, emulsifiers, flavor enhancers, artificial sweeteners. These substances are not added to nourish the body, but to protect profit. They extend shelf life, improve texture, intensify taste, and ensure consistency across millions of identical products. The problem is not that these chemicals exist, it's that the body never evolved to process food designed for factories instead of digestion. When eaten repeatedly, these compounds interact with gut bacteria, hormone signaling, and metabolic pathways in ways labels never explain. They don't act like food, they act like instructions, subtly altering how the body responds to hunger, fullness, and energy use. Individually, each chemical may appear harmless. Collectively, consumed day after day, they create a chemical environment the body must constantly adapt to. That adaptation comes at a cost, often paid silently through inflammation, cravings, and metabolic confusion. Inside the body, these hidden chemicals don't simply pass through. Many interfere with the gut lining, weakening the barrier that decides what enters the bloodstream. Emulsifiers can disrupt gut bacteria balance. Artificial sweeteners can confuse insulin signaling. Flavor enhancers can override natural appetite controls. Preservatives can slow digestion in ways that feel like heaviness or bloating. None of this happens instantly, which is why the danger is easy to dismiss. The effects build gradually, masked as normal fatigue, unexplained hunger, or inconsistent energy. The brain senses something is off, but the source remains invisible because the food looks familiar and socially accepted. This is how chemical exposure becomes normalized, not through danger, but through repetition. The body adjusts its expectations downward. What once felt unnatural becomes routine. And because these chemicals don't always cause immediate illness, they escape blame, even as the body works harder just to maintain balance. The deepest issue with hidden chemicals in packaged food is not toxicity alone, but dependency. Once the body adapts to chemically engineered food, natural food can feel less stimulating at first. Taste buds recalibrate, hunger signals shift, satisfaction becomes harder to recognize. This is not failure, it is conditioning. The food system trains the body to expect stimulation rather than nourishment. Breaking that cycle doesn't require fear or obsession, but awareness. When people reduce chemical exposure, digestion often stabilizes, cravings soften, and hunger becomes clearer again. Not because something new was added, but because interference was removed. Real food doesn't need stabilizers to stay stable in the body. It doesn't need flavor tricks to be satisfying. It works quietly, consistently, and without instruction manuals. Once this contrast becomes visible, hidden chemicals lose their power, not because they disappear, but because they are finally seen for what they are, tools of manufacturing, not ingredients of health. What makes hidden chemicals especially dangerous is how they blur the line between food and stimulus. Real food communicates with the body through digestion, absorption, and feedback. Chemically engineered food communicates through stimulation first and biology later. Taste hits instantly. Texture dissolves unnaturally fast. Flavor lingers longer than digestion should allow. This creates a mismatch in timing. The brain receives excitement before the body receives nutrition. Over time, this desynchronization teaches the body to expect intensity rather than balance. Hunger becomes urgent. Fullness becomes delayed. Satisfaction becomes unreliable. The chemicals are not simply present, they are shaping expectations. This is why people often crave packaged foods during stress, fatigue, or emotional lows. These foods don't nourish resilience, they trigger familiarity. They offer predictable stimulation in a system that feels increasingly unstable. The body isn't asking for chemicals, but it has learned to associate them with quick relief. That association is powerful, and it is intentionally cultivated. Another overlooked impact of hidden chemicals in packaged food is how they fragment responsibility across the food system. No single ingredient is blamed. No single product looks dangerous. Each additive exists within legal limits, tested in isolation, approved for consumption. But the body does not consume chemicals in isolation. It consumes combinations, repeatedly, over years. The cumulative effect is never labeled. No package explains how dozens of additives interact inside a living system already under stress from poor sleep, chronic anxiety, and sedentary routines. This gap between regulation and reality is where long-term harm quietly forms. People don't feel poisoned. They feel off, slightly inflamed, slightly tired, slightly hungry. These vague signals are easy to dismiss, which allows exposure to continue uninterrupted. The system doesn't need people to feel sick. It needs them functional enough to keep buying, and so the damage remains
The most
subtle,
revealing
spread
moment
thin
comes
across
when
time,
chemicals are
invisible,
removed
until
rather
it
than
becomes
added.
normalized.
When packaged foods are reduced, many people report changes they weren't expecting. Hunger becomes calmer, digestion becomes quieter, energy steadies instead of spiking, taste sensitivity returns. This is not detox mythology, it is signal clarity. Without constant chemical interference, the body's feedback systems regain precision. Meals end naturally, cravings lose urgency. The body stops negotiating and starts responding. This contrast exposes the truth hidden chemicals work hardest to conceal. The body already knows how to regulate itself. It doesn't need enhancement, it needs space. Packaged food fills that space with instructions the body never asked for. Once those instructions fade, eating becomes less dramatic but more reliable. And in that reliability lies real nourishment. Not loud, not marketed, not engineered, just effective. Hidden chemicals also change how the body interprets time. Real food digests in phases, creating a slow conversation between the gut and the brain. Chemically engineered food compresses that conversation. Flavor arrives instantly, digestion is delayed or distorted, and hormonal feedback comes late. This mismatch trains the body to expect quick rewards without gradual processing. Over time, patience at the biological level erodes. Hunger becomes sharp instead of gentle. Fullness arrives suddenly instead of smoothly. Energy surges and crashes replace steady endurance. None of this feels extreme in isolation, which is why it goes unnoticed. It feels like modern life. But it is actually modern food reshaping biological rhythm. When meals stop teaching the body how to pace itself, the body compensates by overcorrecting. This creates the constant need to snack, stimulate, or suppress appetite. Not because the body is broken, but because its timing has been disrupted repeatedly. Hidden chemicals don't just alter what the body processes, they alter when the body expects relief. The final consequence of hidden chemicals is psychological, not just physical. When food stops delivering consistent feedback, people stop trusting themselves. Hunger feels unreliable. Satisfaction feels temporary. Eating becomes something to manage rather than experience. This opens the door to external authority, labels, diets, rules, apps, stepping in to replace internal cues. The food system benefits from this loss of confidence. A confused eater is a dependent eater. Chemicals help create that confusion by making outcomes unpredictable while appearances remain reassuring. Breaking this cycle doesn't require perfection or fear. It begins with removing interference and observing response. When food is simple, signals become honest. When signals are honest, trust returns. And when trust returns, eating stops being a problem to solve and becomes what it was always meant to be, a quiet exchange between the body and what sustains it.